I know that some in our audience know the finer points of hockey.
The Chris Johnston Show.
We are your friends.
The biggest stories, bringing you inside the game.
What did you hear?
The Chris Johnston Show.
What is going on?
Here's Chris with your host, Julian McKenzie.
Part of the game.
Big Money CJ in the building, alongside myself. Another great weekend in the books. 2 weeks away from the trade deadline. CJ, how are you feeling?
I'm good. It's kind of the weird time where you start to get a little nervous because it feels like, why isn't more happening? I would say that this is a normal feeling, though. This does come about. Certainly when you're involved with one of the TV productions of that day, and you're like, oh man, what happens? It's like throwing a party, and what happens if no one shows up? What happens if there's no trades? But it's been a little quieter maybe than I might have expected, but 2 weeks is still a long time. And let's look at history. There's enough trade deadlines. I mean, not always the biggest names, but there's always a lot of activity, and I'm sure that sort of avalanche of activity is still brewing here.
That avalanche of activity. Anyway, I'm just kidding.
Some tweet in Colorado with that. That literally I was just thinking of an avalanche, a big explosion of things.
I know. I had a random thought that just came to mind. Since this is going to be your first trade deadline with TSN, would it be funny if they had some kind of like initiation, since you're technically still like the new guy working on the desk with them?
Well, for all I know, they might. I mean, it's funny because like the people that have worked at TSN, like I'm talking off camera too, like they've all worked there. It sort of feels like forever. Like there's like a real sort of culture about the place. Mm-hmm. It's been really neat. And I'm not just saying that because they paid me. Like I've really enjoyed getting to work there and get to know everyone. But there is like sort of a distinct way things are done there. And so because I've never done a trade deadline on that side of the aisle, I'm not sure what's in store come March 21st. But, I don't think it would, if there was an initiation, I'm sure it would be all in good fun, nothing to be concerned about. And yeah, it's going to be weird to do one there. I'm not sure exactly what our setup is like with COVID. Like, I don't know if we can all be in the studio like the way we would normally be, or if some people are remote, but I kind of hope we're all in the studio just because it's a cool day. Like all those days are always neat. I mean, like you don't really like it necessarily sometimes. Like it's a little bit stressful and it's usually early. Like I can even think of my years at Sportsnet, like just like walking into the studio, it's like 6 a.m., drinking coffee, anxious about what's to come. But I hope we're all there because there's a certain energy to that. And it's going to be fun. And it always works out. If that's the thing, you got to remind yourself. It's just, you always get some news and things happen. And then the best part of a trade deadline, as I said to you, is there's no more trade deadline once it's over.
That's true. I imagine that day is like a 3 coffee day or 4 coffee day for people who drink coffee as much as the rest of the world does, I guess. As someone who only drinks like one a week, like I'm not a 2-3 coffee guy, but I imagine for you it might be.
For sure. I mean, I call Tuesday a 3 coffee day sometimes. So, I mean, any day where, especially because, usually that weekend can be busy. Like sometimes you're up late at night, the Sunday night, because the moves start happening then. And then, you sleep 4 hours and you're going in the studio and being on TV for 8 hours. Look, there's manual labor jobs that are much more difficult, but it can be a busy few days and sort of a mentally tiring few days. A lot of staring at these little phones in our hands and texting people. And so, yeah, that's definitely a multiple coffee day. The biggest issue, of course, is we're on live like the whole day. So you gotta watch the bathroom breaks, if you know what I'm saying. So you don't want to be drinking too much coffee. But I can't believe you have 1 coffee a week. Like, when do you decide to have your 1 coffee? Like, how does that work?
When I feel at my most stressed in a week, or like if I'm going through a day on the editing desk where I just have so many things to edit, so many things coming at me, I might feel that way. I think I had my 1 coffee this week yesterday because I was actually in a FIFA tournament and I was losing way too many games. And I was just like, I need to get myself going. It did not work, but still the coffee was necessary. I needed the coffee to get me going.
So what happens if you're stressed tomorrow? You're going to be like, I've already had my coffee this week, so I can't?
So because there have been so many weeks in my life where I know I haven't had coffee, if I know I need another coffee in the week, some of those coffees I haven't used kind of roll into the next week, but like I don't like overdo it.
Now, unless I'm missing something, it's not like coffee's bad for you.
No,
I mean, obviously you want to limit any sort of drug you're putting in your body or whatever, caffeine. But I mean, I drink black coffee. Like I feel like there's no guilt associated with having a couple of those a day. I mean, what's the issue?
Nah, for me, I don't know. I got adjusted to the taste like kind of late in my life. And I was like, you know what, this is okay, but this is not something I see myself being overly dependent on. And also I like it. I don't like it black. I like it like sweet. So like, I know for sure if I'm going to have it sweet, I can't have it like 3-4 times a day. Like if I'm going to have a French vanilla, like a 1 coffee is like, that's enough. Like I don't need to have like 3-4 of those a day. Absolutely not. I think at least 1 or 2 times I've tried to do that. And I felt like really like not well doing that too. So like it's for my the best interest of myself to just keep it at a minimum when it comes to coffee, or have tea or water or one of these drinks with actual electrolytes that don't have any advertising with us.
Got you. Yeah. Okay. If you're having sugar in there, then limit that stuff. But black coffee, don't be bringing me down. It's one of life's simple things. I'm not joking. Like when I wake up, like it actually like gets me excited for the day that I'm going to have a coffee. So, whatever it takes, my friend.
Okay. Well, next time I see you, I'll try to find some like really cool like coffee beans or something. Are you like a Keurig or a K-cup guy, or are you trying to grind the beans yourself?
I'm doing the whole process, grinding the beans and put them in a coffee maker generally.
All right, cool. All right. Next time, if I have any family members that come up from Jamaica or something, I'll get them to like bring like the Blue Mountain coffee beans, which are supposed to be like really popular. I'll get that going for you. I had like 1 or 2 other questions before I get to the trading pile. I know we were starting off a little casually this morning, but what I wanted to do today,
hey man, we're easing into the week. We're dipping a toe. You said it looked like a character from Euphoria. I mean, we're down. You
look like Fezco. You look like Fezco for real. You dead ass look like Fezco. You look like our producer Dick said it off camera, but you're NHL insider by day. Can I be allowed to say drug dealer by night? I mean, I kind of did. So
I'm not a drug dealer, so I'm okay with that. Yeah. I'm gonna need the audience to weigh in on this. So, like, is this like a real thing? Is Julian crazy? Because I haven't seen Euphoria. I don't know if he's insulting me with this. Like,
you're not. I'm not insulting you. He's legit the coolest character on the show. Like, he's cool. He's the only one that like isn't like nuts at this point. I mean, he could go off, but he's not. He's a likable dude. Just like you are.
Okay.
I promise you we're not insulting you. When we say you look like Fesco. What I was going to say is we're going to do an extended version of the trading pile. And it is going to include some names, some very popular names that people like to ask us about. And even if there isn't much to talk about, we're still going to discuss them anyway. But before I get to that, I wanted to follow up on an earlier point you had made, in the fact that there's still some things you're just kind of getting used to with being at TSN and handling the trade deadline stuff with them, as opposed to what you've done in the past few years with Sportsnet. I was just curious if there was anything in particular that you were still trying to get adjusted to, or anything like that.
No, not really. Like, because I go to the studio a couple times a week, and I've done that this season, and so like I feel comfortable in the surroundings. Like, it's nothing like that. It's just, there's a certain way of doing things, and like that day is very specific. And I haven't been through one before. So but like, I'm not worried about it or anything. I've got a great relationship with Darren Dreger and Pierre LeBrun, my 2 colleagues that we primarily do the same thing. Obviously there'll be a lot of analysts and other people in on that day, but typically how that day has worked for me, even in the past when I was with Elliot Friedman and John Shannon or whoever it was over the years, Nick Kyprios back in the day. I mean, really you're kind of just working in that small team generally. Usually the insiders are at a certain desk and you're literally saying all day, hey, I heard this guy might be going here. And you're just shading your information and texting, kind of just like trying to do it by committee. And so like my actual job will just be mostly that day working with Darren and Pierre and obviously the producers of the show. But, I'm not so anxious about that or uncertain about that, but it's, it's going to be weird. It's going to be different. But I like it. I mean, the funny thing about media, and like, you know this, Julian, obviously you're in the media. I think sometimes maybe people think there's like an actual rivalry, whereas I've never really felt that way. Like, I feel like people are supportive of everyone in the industry, you know, whether that's people working for rival newspapers or news organizations, TV stations. It's no different. I mean, the truth is we're all kind of buddies. I think I told this story on here, but I'm famous for repeating stories about Las Vegas. Stanley Cup final, we did at TSN and Sportsnet dinner.
Yeah, and David Amber, everyone, you guys were playing around with credit cards, and David
we did
Amber was
game at the end.
Yeah,
but I'm using that to illustrate the point here that like we like get on the road and we're all going to dinner together and stuff. So, so moving jobs isn't maybe as strange as it might be, because it's not like trading. I think trading teams would be different. Although, you know, players are more friendly nowadays too, probably with each other. But like, I think you don't really know how someone else. That feeling would be weird. I would think. Probably what makes the trade deadline so hard on players too, right? I mean, you're going to go through the trading pile and you're going to be talking about people that might have to move cities and they don't know where they're going, and you know, there is the human side to it. But anyway, it's a long answer to say I feel comfortable with TSN now. I'm excited for that trade deadline, but I am curious. Like, I'm sure we'll talk about it when we do our debrief after the 21st, our first episode, that just to compare notes on how it is, because I guess not a lot of people have done one on both sides, really. I mean, there's not a lot of people that work for both companies. You know, way back in the day, I know Darren Dreger did work for Sportsnet long before my time there, and he went to TSN. But by and large, you know, I'm going to get to see how the sausage is made in two different factories.
I can't wait to hear your insights on that. I'm just as excited for that as with all the trades that we'll see at the deadline. And speaking of those trades, like, what's it been like communicating with GMs or other players or even agents? I guess just like 2 weeks out from the deadline and getting a sense of like what's going on, and things are kind of quiet right now. Like, what's that like?
Yeah, you're hearing that a little bit, that it's quiet. As I say though, like I don't read too much into it. I mean, here's the actual fact. Like, so many teams don't have cap space, and so it doesn't make sense to make a trade today when you can save another week and a half or 2 weeks of cap space, you know, before making those deals. So I just think some of this is literally just timing. Like, it's not because teams don't want to make trades or the players that are available aren't any good or anything like that. I think it's a function of the way the system works. And, you know, teams have made the calls, look, by and large. I mean, look, some needs might pop up here. Someone gets an injury on their team or something. But for the most part, the teams have long since sort of identified the group of players they were going to try to, you know, acquire. The conversations have happened between the other team, like they sort of know what the price is. And now it's just a matter of when you pull the trigger on trying to make the deal happen. And so it does feel like this weekend felt quiet. But as I say, I don't say that to predict a quiet trade deadline. I don't think that will be the case. And, you know, probably by next weekend, you're still a week out though. It's like, let's face it, it's going to be 10 days probably before there's much action. You might see a trade or two in the meantime, but you know, it's going to be those last 3 or 4 days where you see 40 trades. I mean, that's the way it goes. And so we're waiting for Christmas morning still here, pal.
That is exactly why we're probably going to need an emergency podcast before the deadline at some point. I think it's going to happen. I think that's going to happen at this point. I mean, if what you're saying is true, I think we got to get a jump on it and tell the boss man, Adam Wild, we might need an extra podcast before the deadline. That's just my inkling of things. That's me putting it out there in the universe. We could have a discussion about
that. That means you're going to have to work the weekend, because the only time it would make sense is probably to do it Saturday or Sunday right before the deadline. Probably the Sunday.
Okay. But like, I like doing this show. So what's the issue?
I don't know. You take one coffee a week. Like, you got to choose that week when you're going to have your coffee. I mean, we're doing an extra show. I mean,
I'm not particularly worried about that. I believe in the principle that Jalen Rose does on his podcast with, I think the Jalen Jacoby podcast on ESPN. I believe in that principle. You've got to give the people what they want. And I think the people would very much want us to talk about trades and talk about players and talk about all the good stuff of the trade deadline ahead of the trade deadline. I'm all in it to give the people what they want. And also, this is good for me. I just get to be in the know. This is like a cheat sheet for me, essentially. So I can go about my life covering the NHL. So, there's something in it for me too. It's not just like, let me just tire myself out for good old CJ.
I get to hear about like shows and people I look like that I don't even know. So you're giving me like a little bit of cultural kind of, knowledge about Euphoria, because I don't think I'm going to watch that show. I really don't believe it. We'll get
that's okay. That's okay. I mean, I'm just picturing you as like a Euphoria fan, just like sharing like some of the memes and stuff. That'd be real funny. That would be a good way for you to enhance to add to your audience. On top of that, just like post like trade rumors. Actually, you should post like a random idea. Just gonna workshop this idea before we get to the trading pile, because I know that people are waiting patiently for it. Anytime a rumor like comes around, like just post a meme from the show, like some player that no one talked about getting traded or whatever, and you just throw up like a photo of one of the characters from the show, Maddie, yelling out, "Bitch, you better be joking," or something like that. Like that could be something you could do.
That might be a little edgy for my my brand.
It's a free idea, CJ. You don't have to take it if you don't want to. I'm just putting it out there and just giving you different ideas that could help with your pre-trade deadline coverage.
All right. I'll take it under consideration.
Probably not, but I understand. Let's get to the trading pile, an extended version. Normally we have like 4 or 5 names that are in there, sometimes a 6, but I put out a handful of names. There's one name on here that I'm very intrigued about what you'll say. There's another name on here where it's not so much for the name, but more for the contract. Let's get to some of these names. Let's go with the big one, the name that will very likely be the biggest name thrown out there at the trade deadline. We've already discussed him before. Claude Giroux of the Philadelphia Flyers. What have you heard?
Well, there's a lot of scouting activity around the Flyers these days. And, that isn't just Claude Giroux. They have some defensemen available, Justin Braun, potentially Risto Ristolainen. I could see them being a fairly active seller at the deadline, but I think it's fair to start connecting dots to Giroux. And I know last week they played 2 home games, and Chris McFarland, the assistant GM of the Avalanche, took in those games. So, a lot of whispers about Colorado. Colorado definitely has interest in Giroux. And so, I still think this one is going to play out close to the 21st. I mean, he's still got a chance to play his 1,000th game, all with the Flyers, prior to this trade happening and still being able to be moved by the deadline. And so, watch Colorado there, watch Florida. I think his interest in Giroux. And, really those are the only kinds of teams I would imagine he would want to go to too. I mean, this is an emotional decision for him. But I do expect he will ultimately waive his no move clause prior to the deadline and be traded. And if he's going to go through the trouble, it's reminds me of Jerome McGinley years ago when he left Calgary. He wants to go somewhere where he feels he has a chance to win a Stanley Cup. And I think Colorado and Florida are 2 of the teams that would give him a chance to do that. So, that's kind of my sense of where it's at with him. I think Philly can get pretty good return here. It's funny because you're probably going to mention there's a number of big names, I feel like, this year at the deadline that are around, and I'm sure we're going to get through them. To me, how many first-round picks get dealt? Like anyone, there's only so many teams ever willing to move their first rounder. Obviously, some teams have already in prior deals moved the first rounder. Mm-hmm. That'll be a real question to me because so many of these names require, I would think, a first-round pick just to get in the door, like first plus. So I would think that. I believe Colorado doesn't have its first rounder in 2022, but maybe they can move a future first or a prospect. I think the Leafs would potentially move their first if the right deal was there. Like, there's only going to be a few first rounders moved, and so that's one of the challenges I think with some of these names is I really believe this is going to be a buyer's market. I think there's more teams that want to sell than teams that are really anxiously buying, and so that'll be kind of an interesting dynamic to track as we get to when the moves start flying.
I'm trying to see if I could find the number of draft picks for the Colorado Avalanche here. You are right. They do not have their first round pick for this year's draft. And
they traded in the Kemper deal to Arizona, I think.
And if my eyes are correct, I believe they do not have their second round pick as well. That pick was traded away early in October. So they do not have their first 2 picks in this year's upcoming draft. So pretty interesting in terms of capital for them if they want to make a move for Claude Giroux or anyone else that's available at the trade deadline. So that's interesting. Yeah, they don't have their first two draft picks.
Right. And so, whether we're talking about Giroux or if Anaheim puts Hampus Lindholm on the market, if Thomas Hertl gets on the market in San Jose, I know the Sharks are trying to re-sign him as we speak. But, there's some pretty big name potentially. I don't really buy the Philip Forsberg thing, but if Nashville were to put Philip Forsberg on the market, you're expecting first round picks. I mean, even all the rumors around Vancouver, right? Like I know that Vancouver's interested in getting players too. They're not maybe as interested in picks, so maybe it's a little different there. But there's just a lot of names, and I just don't see all the first rounders that make those names make sense. And so what I think will be interesting to watch, like with Anaheim in particular, for example, and look, they're crawling right back in the playoff race again. So, this could affect how the next 2 weeks, how they perform on the ice might affect things. But it's like, what happens if the prices aren't there? Like, do you just move the restricted free agents to move them basically to get something back, or do you hold on to it and try your luck that way? And that'll be an interesting choice for Pat Verbeek, I think, as the 21st approaches.
So Hampus Lindholm, Ricard Raquel. I'm trying to think of any other name that could be flipped out from the Anaheim Ducks, but they're also expected to be busy. I know you kind of touched off on Lindholm or Raquel or anything else on the Ducks front that you want to mention.
Well, I think if Lindholm gets dealt, he's to me I would call him the number one player. Like I think he's the top rental available. I mean, we're talking about a defenseman who can play 22 minutes a night. I mean, he's a top pairing defenseman. I understand he'd be a rental, so it's short-term acquisition for whoever might trade him for him, but that would be an impactful move if it came to that. But the Ducks are trying to re-sign him. I think an issue that's cropped up in that negotiation or the challenge there is finding the right term. You've seen, whether you go back to the Morgan Riley deal earlier this season, he got 8 years. In the offseason, a number of defensemen signed long-term contracts, Seth Jones, some younger ones like Cale Makar, but the point is that, if you're Lindholm, you're going to be pushing for as long a term a deal as you can get. And I think the Ducks are a little wary of that. So, it's too soon to say how that'll go because they are talking. They have talked. They have spoken. But, if he gets moved, to me, as much as Giroux's a big name, like I just can't think of a more impactful player. Like for me, he'd be number one on my power rankings of best players moved if in fact he does get traded.
So you would put him above two other defensemen who have been mentioned ahead of the deadline in John Klingberg and Jacob Chychrun.
Yeah, well, Chychrun's different because, I mean, look, he's not a rental, right? He's got 3 more years on his deal. He's 23 years old. So I do think that that's a little different. And obviously his name's been out there a long time. I don't feel like he has to be moved by the deadline. It's clearly Anaheim's preference if they get a certain price point to move him, but no one stepped up and paid that price before now. I mean, and that's a hockey trade, as I say. Like that's not trading an asset because he's about to walk out the door as a free agent. That's a little different. I think Klingberg, there's been a decline to his game the last 2 seasons. He's had a great career and he's still a useful player. But for me, if I'm an NHL GM and I'm choosing between, if the price is the exact same, if the circumstances are the same, I'm taking Lindholm over Klingberg.
Okay. Anything on so you're saying with this play decreasing the last little while, I guess the interest is also cooled for Klingberg as well.
Well, I don't know the Stars. I'm not sure the Stars want to move him. Look, they're right there in the playoff fringes as well. 2 hat tricks last week for Jason Robertson.
Yeah, big time.
I don't know if we're like at the point. I hate when we're like most underrated player in the league kind of thing because it's sort of a meme in itself. But like, I'm not sure that people pay attention to how good Jason Robertson is already and has become. I mean, 29 goals this season. I feel like he doesn't get a lot of good. He doesn't get a lot of like. He's not getting the sort of love or the shine of most players that are in that keep in that kind of company. But yeah, I'm not certain that Dallas wants. Look. Klingberg asked for a trade, but the team doesn't, lots of times players ask for a trade and the trade doesn't happen. I mean, it's got to be a trade that makes sense for Dallas as well. And because of where they're at in the standings, I think if they're trading him, there has to be some other deal where they're getting a defenseman back to replace him. And so, that I'm not saying it won't happen, but it feels a little less likely again, because he's been out there for a while and available. But look, there's a few teams that it goes right down to the wire where they're deciding what they're going to do. And I think all things being equal, the Stars would like a playoff run rather than just trading away someone for future assets.
Okay, so how about this name, JT Miller of the Vancouver Canucks? You briefly mentioned them earlier on.
There's tons of interest in him,
Yes.
but Vancouver's made up its mind. Like it's got to take a real package to get him. I mean, if you look at it, I don't know where he is today, but he's like a top 10 scorer in the moment in the league. If you look across like the last 3 seasons, he's a top 20 scorer in the NHL over 3 seasons. He's having a terrific year. And, he's got one more year on his deal. I think that's what makes him appealing if you're teams, is that you're not getting him for one shot at a playoff run. You get him for 2 years. The Rangers have been in on him. I'd keep an eye on LA with JT Miller. I could see Minnesota going there. I think the Leafs have at least inquired on him. I don't necessarily think he's their priority or anything, but, but there's been some smoke around that. But, what Vancouver is telling teams is, like, we need a great young player back, plus, it's not – I just don't know if anyone's going to pay the price that compels them to make that trade. I mean, JT Miller's been the most productive Canuck going this year. And so, yeah, that one's kind of in limbo. Like, I feel like between JT Miller, Brock Besser, and Connor Garland, I could see one of the 3 being traded. I don't see all 3 of them being traded. There's different dynamics to each trade. Brock Besser's playing out his contract this year. He's an RFA. He's got a big qualifying offer in the summer, $7.5 million. Connor Garland is signed at a pretty good value contract. That Vancouver signed him after trading for him from Arizona in the summer. But, you have to want to have him for 3 or 4 years if you're making that deal. And so there's sort of different types of assets that all play forward. They all sort of address similar needs. But it's definitely possible JT Miller's traded, but it's going to take like if LA's doing that deal, like it's like Quentin Byfield or something like that. You know what I mean? Like it's, and I'm not saying the Kings would do that, but this is what I'm only illustrating the point. Like I think for the Leafs, like I think Vancouver would want Rasmus Sandin as part of the package coming back. And if you're Toronto, you're like, Sandin's coming into his own. He's finally, he's playing more minutes this year than in the past. Do you really want to trade someone right before the best years of their career to get a JT Miller? And I think that's, so it's going to be a big ask from the Canucks. And so, I'm not sure that anyone's going to meet that price. That's kind of where we're at with them.
Just want to emphasize for those last few players you mentioned, that's not at all what's being proposed out there. You're just trying to give an idea of what it might take to get a JT Miller. Yeah.
And if you radio me internet on that one.
Yeah. Come on, guys. Come on. Don't radio us, and certainly don't do the whole from TCJS BS. Like, don't do that. Okay. Don't do that. Anyway, Ben Chiarot of the Montreal Canadiens.
Yeah. I mean, the Canadiens have wanted him traded by now, right? I mean, just because of protecting their asset, they did talk to Calgary about moving him the same weekend they traded Tyler Toffoli. It didn't happen. They couldn't find a way to make that work. But, I think the Canadiens' position has been with Chiarot is, they want the David Savard package, essentially, that Columbus got when they moved him to Tampa last year, the deadline. That was a first and a fourth, I believe. But I think they feel something like that is in order. We'll see if they get it. That this is where when I say, like, there's only so many first round picks that get traded. I mean, maybe they have to change their view on that. Maybe it's a prospect coming back instead. I mean, there's different ways to do this, but no one has stepped up, despite a lot of teams calling on Chiarot really all season long. No one stepped up and made that move yet. But I would be surprised if the deadline came without him being moved. It fits a lot of teams' needs. Rental, his contract is not too onerous, which is a key, because as we've talked, I mean, everyone will get bored of hearing about cap space at this deadline, but it's a real issue. There's not enough teams with enough cap space to make the moves they want to make. And so for all those reasons and the way Chiarot plays, I think he's a pretty valuable commodity. And we'll see where he ends up. I wouldn't be surprised if Calgary took another run at him, honestly. But there's been a lot of other teams there. There's some feeling St. Louis is, perhaps one of the favorites to get him. But we'll see how it goes.
Do you envision with Chiarot, and you could pretty much put this out for so many other teams, you had mentioned about it being a buyer's market, that the prices are going to have to come down if everyone's just kind of holding back and thinking, man, like I don't have the cap space to make this move. Assets, certainly the asking price for certain assets has to come down, right?
Yeah, well, it's interesting how you handle that if you're a team with multiple players to move, right? Like, it's fair to say Montreal would like to make more trades than Chiarot. I'm not sure if they're going to be able to because some of the other players, whether it's Jeff Petrie or whatever, they have a big contract to move out, and that might not be possible. But if you're Anaheim and you decide you're trying to move Lindholm and Raquel, like, in order to spur some action, you might have to lower the price. I think there's going to be a little bit of my sense is there's going to be a little bit of a staring contest though with some of the prices and the assets and see who blinks, right? I mean, but this is just my theory, piecing together the information I have, that it's going to be a buyer's market. It just feels like so many teams have been out of the playoff race like for like half the season already. Those teams are desperate to salvage something from the year, right? To get some picks to start, building their program up to be better next season. So just feels like there's a lot of inventory on the market, my friend.
When the moment for intimacy arrives, you need to be ready. Roman ready. Whether you've been in a relationship for years or are just getting started, having the confidence that comes from preparation means you're free to enjoy the moment when the moment comes. Even though you are far from ordinary, the truth is that ED is really common. In fact, 52% of guys aged between 40 and 70 experience some form of erectile dysfunction. Go to GetRoman.com/Johnston now to speak to a U.S. licensed healthcare professional about erectile dysfunction and get $15 off your first month of treatment. ED is more common than people think. I mentioned earlier that 52% of men between the ages of 40 and 70 will experience some form of ED. But we got to talk about the benefits of ED treatment. It will help you reconnect with your partner and rediscover the joy of sex. Roman Ready is confidence personified. It is the self-assurance that comes from knowing you've prepared yourself for the moment when intimacy arrives. Getting started is simple. Just go to GetRoman.com/Johnston and complete an online visit. Again, GetRoman.com/Johnston today. And if you're prescribed, you can get $15 off your first month of ED treatment. Make sure you're ready to have confidence and control. Roman Ready. GetRoman.com/Johnston. Basketball and hockey very much in full swing. And for many of us, there's no better way to enjoy the games than by having some skin in the game. That is why BetMGM remains the exclusive betting partner of The Athletic. And as a fan of The Athletic, you can bet $10 to win $150 plus a free 3-month subscription or extension of your subscription to The Athletic when you bet with BetMGM using our promo code. Sign up at betmgm.com and use the promo code TheAthleticPod at checkout to take advantage of this special offer from the king of sportsbooks. That's bet $10 to win $150 plus 3 months free from The Athletic at betmgm.com. And you have to use the promo code TheAthleticPod at checkout. The Athletic Pod, all in one word. New customer offer. Visit betmgm.com for terms and conditions. Are GMs going to essentially stare at each other like that one scene in The Office where Michael Scott, Dwight, and Andy are just kind of doing finger guns at each other? It's probably going to be that, right? And like Pam comes in and she tries to like play along and then she like walks out. It's probably going to be like that. Am I right?
I think it'll be exactly like that. You just pick your GMs that are in that scaring contest.
SDPN memes, get on that. PK Subban. What about PK Subban? Tom Fitzgerald, by the way, had a conversation with Pierre LeBrun of The Athletic, a good friend of ours. And Tom Fitzgerald straight up was just like, hey, man, look, I've had the talk with PK Subban and they'll make a trade that's right for the organization, but not necessarily backing down from the idea that he could be moved.
No, but like I read the story, my sense there, like he was almost saying like, look, I would trade him. And we've had the conversation that if something comes along that makes sense, we're going to do it. But, I think he recognizes that the $9 million cap hit tied to PK is is going to be a challenge. And even if they retain half the salary, which they're able to do, even if they just double retain and he's traded to another team, still a pretty big salary. And so, I don't have a strong feeling he'll get moved. I think it certainly, obviously it's possible. They're open to the idea, but I just don't see it that price tag. I don't think it's very likely, quite honestly. But again, injuries pop up or teams are in on someone else and someone else moves. Like, a right shot defenseman is still a huge valuable commodity in hockey. Most teams feel like they're one short because very few teams have 3 right-hand shot defensemen that they're comfortable with for each of their pairings. And so, it's possible, but I'd say not likely on PK.
Okay. What about Max Domi?
I don't really got a good sense what's going on there. I mean, it makes sense to move him, where he's at in as a free agent, where Columbus is at this season. But I really it's been quiet around him. And so I don't really have good specific info for you, like what teams would be there. On the surface, it would make sense. Look, they exposed them in the expansion draft. But I don't know. I don't know how that's going to play out.
Okay. We kind of mentioned him a little bit earlier. Philip Forsberg. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add with that, but we did kind of touch off on him in a previous episode, and just getting the sense that the Preds at the very least really want to extend him, even though his name has been put out there in a couple trade rumors.
Yeah. Well, look, it doesn't sound like they've caught much fire in their contract talks, but the Predators want to keep him. He wants to stay. You basically have a ceiling of Roman Yossi's contract. Like, I don't see Forsberg getting more than that, even as great a season as he's had. And Yossi's got a goofy number. Judd Moldaver, his agent, likes to put his players' numbers in the cap hit. So I think it's $9.059 million. And then you have, Matt Duchene and Ryan Johansson making $8 million. Like, to me, the sweet spot is somewhere between that range. And, I'd be surprised. I'd be surprised if they didn't find a way to get that deal done. It might not happen by the deadline, but I just think that they have sort of a happy marriage there. The numbers staring you in the face, and Forsberg's having a great year. And so I think even if he's not signed on the 21st of March to an extension, I'd be quite surprised if David Poile traded him, because it just feels like that's where he fits. That's where he wants to be, and they'll find a way to get a contract done at some point.
Speaking of contract, what about Shea Weber's contract? I believe Elliot Friedman kind of mentioned that over the weekend, that the Canadiens are trying to move that deal.
Yeah, well, look, it can help in 2 ways. It could help a team, say, like in Arizona, that might need to hit the cap floor, or Ottawa, or teams like that are among the lower spending teams. And it could help, potentially, I guess, it could help someone in LTII. But it's more likely going to go, if it gets moved, I would think it's more likely going to go to a team that wants the cap hit. I mean, the money itself is low, which is a bonus for some of those teams. And, we've seen those types of moves traded before. I think Pavel Datsyuk technically finished out as a Coyote. I think Chris Pronger
too. Yep, he did.
As a Coyote. I mean, it feels like that's potentially where the fit would be, somewhere like Arizona. And, it would clearly benefit the Canadians. It would just maybe allow them not to have to operate in LTIR all season long in future seasons. But yeah, I mean, look, there's a price to taking that on. The Canadians are going to have to sweeten the deal. They do own a lot of draft picks, so I could see that scenario playing out. But yeah, a lot of players have retired as Coyotes. Technically, officially, they got their last paychecks with the Coyotes logo on it.
You could start putting together like a ring of honor for some of those players. That'd be like a funny thing to do. You just put some of the legends they take in and just have them on a ring of honor or whatever.
I think SDPN memes can get on that too, but
we're giving SDPMs a lot of work for a dude who ain't on payroll. Let's go. I want to go back to the Devils with this other player, Damon Severson. That's another name that I know the Leafs have been linked to in a bit.
Yeah, I think a lot of teams would like Severson, impactful defenseman, still signed next season. I don't get the sense that New Jersey feels they have to move him by any stretch. So they're taking calls on him, but a little different circumstances, not in a rental year. But I think there could be a fit in Toronto, there could be a fit in Vancouver. I think a lot of teams could find space for him in their lineup. But, it's, again, it doesn't feel like there's a ton of action there at the time being. I don't expect him to be traded at the deadline.
What about Mark Giordano of the Seattle Kraken?
Yeah, he will be traded. He played his 1,000th game over the weekend. Already a conversation has been had there with Ron Francis and his agent and Mark about, how this will go down. I think the organization will want to do right by him. He was their first captain in team history. I think everyone's clamoring for a Calgary reunion there in a sense. Maybe for the storybook style of it, and also because the Flames, really have a great team and a chance to go on a long playoff run. I'm not sure the Flames will do that. It's not that they don't want him back, but there's an element. I mean, he was their captain for a long time. The team's kind of growing in his absence, and I think that there's a question about how that might fit. But certainly, Giordano is still impactful on the ice, despite being 38. And, I think he'll be moved to a contender here before the deadline.
What about the name Marc-Andre Fleury? We've kicked him around a lot. His name on the show anyway. I'm curious what's the latest with him.
We have, and there's no indication yet that he wants to leave Chicago. And, he's got a limited no trade clause, does Fleury. So technically the team could trade him to, I think he has a 10-team no trade clause or something along that lines. But there was an understanding when he came to Chicago in the offseason between him and the organization that essentially that they would only move him if he wanted to be moved. And so, to my knowledge, he hasn't shown any indication that he wants to be moved at this point in time. I do think it's very certain that Marc-Andre Fleury is going to continue to play next season. But, he has the cap hit challenges that a lot of other players do. It's $7 million cap hit. So I think that's difficult. And I think that, look, he's got a family. I think he's enjoying his season in Chicago. So, at this point in time, it could still change, but I don't expect him to be moved. And, I do think you'll see him, maybe he'll sign somewhere new next season, maybe stays in Chicago, but he's going to continue his career. So he's not playing out the string here, but I do think he's unless, one of the absolute top contenders, maybe their goaltender suffers an injury or something like that, something that might compel him to change his mind. I don't think he's too inclined to move on.
I just want to throw out something I was discussing with my buddy Justin Carthborough on the Yahoo Sports Hockey podcast over the weekend. What if the Canadiens figured out a way to move out that Carey Price contract? If that was even something they'd even want to do, do you think Fleury going to the Canadiens makes sense?
It does, but it would still, for me, it's still a free agent decision. You know what I mean? It's still I don't think it makes sense for them to trade for him right now. I think it might make sense for them to say, hey, we got this open spot. Do you want to come sign here for $2 million, be our backup, or maybe be their starter still? I mean, the amazing thing about Fleury is many games he's played as deep into his career as he is, he's still having a slightly above average season, I would say, behind a team, frankly, that isn't that sound defensively. So he can still play. And so, yeah, I haven't thought of that Fleury. I've never run it by anyone or anything like that. That's not reporting, but I do think it makes sense on the surface to have to connect him to Montreal. I'm sure he'd love to finish in his home province. But maybe, it's all about priorities. I mean, it might be a bigger priority to try to win a Stanley Cup. And, while the Canadiens have enjoyed this surge of success under Marty St. Louis, I don't think next season we're going to be talking about them making a run towards the Stanley Cup.
That's very fair. And again, I mean, he totally in his right to try to chase a Stanley Cup. Which is really interesting because he's already done that, right? That's why the fact that he would still want to play, I'm really intrigued at that because dude has already proven that he's a Hall of Famer. We're talking about the reigning Vezina Trophy winner, and he got those cups out the way with Pittsburgh. So that's really interesting that he would still want to play. But hey, if you still want to play, all the power to you if you can still do it because he's still playing at a high level. Yeah,
well, here's the thing. I've talked to a number of players over the years. I remember Justin Williams saying this. He's you only get such a finite time to be one of the best in the world at something, right? And the minute you stop, there are instances of players leaving and then coming back, but it's pretty rare. I mean, for the most part, you can't step off the treadmill. You have to stay on it while you're on it. And Marc-Andre Fleury just exudes joy. I think he just loves the game. He's almost childlike in his enthusiasm. And, he's a first overall pick in 2003. Like he's been around a long time, but he still loves it and he's still performing well. So why not? I mean, Jaromir Jagr's still playing in Czech Republic, man. He was playing in the NHL when he was 45. Joe Thornton's still playing. Giordano Chara's still playing. I mean, obviously it takes, some of it's injury luck and then obviously just, God-given talent, whatever it is, and then work ethic. But, I think I don't push anyone out of the league sooner than they want to be there. I mean, as long as you can do it, why not?
Yeah, I don't want to push out MAF either. Just intrigued and curious at that. The final name I want to bring up on the trading pile is Patrick Kane of Chicago. The report was kind of floating out there. David Pagnotta was on the NHL Network with wow, I can't speak today. Jackie Redmond. Wow. Okay. This whole rumor thing has really got me frazzled here. And Pagnotta kind of mentioned that the Colorado Avalanche might be one of the teams kind of asking about Patrick Kane's availability, which is a bit interesting to me. I know we talked about Chicago and Pittsburgh last week on our show, but I wonder if Chicago would consider moving Patrick Kane to Colorado of all places.
Wow. First of all, he owns a no movement clause, so he's not moving anywhere he doesn't want to move. And, I think this is a summer conversation. Like there's the possibility that he's moved in the summer. I'd be stunned if it happened during the regular season. I mean, $10.5 million cap hit is just almost a non-starter. It's not that he's not worth the money. It's just most teams aren't sitting around with that kind of cap space that would want to trade for him. I look, the Blackhawks, Kyle Davidson, when he was hired as their GM, had Kane and Taves and Fleury and Seth Jones in the room, told them he was going to go through a rebuild. I think made it pretty clear that anything that happens with any of them, like they'll have a role in it. And so I don't see that happening during the season. We'll see how Patrick Kane feels in the summer. I saw he had a quote around this, last week saying, it's a hard decision for him, right? I mean, there's not very many players get to play their whole career with one organization. He's won 3 Stanley Cups in Chicago. Obviously going to go down as a Blackhawks legend. I don't know how that's going to bounce, but as I say, I don't think it's going to happen during the season here.
You got a trade coming? I hear the buzzing in the background.
I got a call coming in.
Okay. All right. Well, it's probably not a trade. Also, you are a very good friend for not roasting me on somehow butchering Jackie Redmond's name. I don't know what happened in my brain in the last minute there, but holy crap. It just, for whatever reason, I just malfunctioned for a minute. So please feel free to roast me for not getting up the name Jackie. I don't know what the hell happened.
I got your back, man. We're just moving past it. We're good.
I appreciate you, bro. It's time for Ask CJ. We've got through the trading pile. We've got some questions in from Twitter and Reddit. Sorry, not Reddit, from Discord. Again, geez, you know what? I need that second coffee now. You know what? I'm going to take a black coffee after I finish this. Twitter and Discord. This is crazy, man. Jeez, we'll finish this.
Take your hair down, Julian.
I know. Jeez. Twitter and Discord. We got questions from there. Like all I could do is laugh. Here's one from Dale JH66 on Twitter. Do you think Michael Bunting should be a Calder candidate? If not, how do you rank the top 5? Anton Lundell made a pretty good case this weekend.
Yeah, he should be a candidate. He meets the criteria. It's different because he's older and he just meets it barely. Like he played just under the number of games that would disqualify him, and he's 26 years old, so he's at the top end of there. But look at the season he's having. Of course, he's one of the available candidates. He's having one of the best seasons among a rookie, and that's all we're measuring with the Calder Trophy. The rookie, the judge to be the best rookie or whatever. So I think he's there. You got to put Moritz Seider there. I think Anton Lundell is there. Lucas Raymond will get some love from Detroit. Like I haven't gone through and really looked at it. I can't rank them 1 to 5 off the top of my head, but that to me is the group of players that we're choosing between. And yeah, like I think Bunting is going to be a finalist. I'd be surprised. I mean, unless there's some rapid fall off in his next 25 games. I mean, he's leading rookies in goals. He's had a fantastic season. He's a little older than everyone else, so I can understand maybe some pushback there from people. But I think he's in the top 3 for sure.
Next one from AC Pregler. The Pens are very good, and they made sure to capitalize very and good in a closing window and are looking at the last year with the old core intact. What are they going to do at the deadline to push all in? Or are they willing to let this year be completely based on Crosby, Malkin, Letang magic?
Yeah, I don't feel like they have much cap space to get anything significant done. So, I could see some tinkering around the edges, but what happens is going to be based around the guys that have done it year in and year out for them. I don't see them getting in on. They're not trading for Claude Giroux, probably for a lot of reasons. I'm sure that would be a strange, given the rivalry between the Penguins and Flyers over the years. But they just don't have the space available to make any dramatic moves. So they're having a way better season than I would have expected. I think that they'll do what they can to improve the team, but they're kind of limited in their flexibility to make any big splashes.
This one from Philip Kowalski on Twitter. I follow the NHL from Sweden, and I'm not familiar with all the rivalries. Could you describe whatever rivalry is there between the Leafs and the Sabres heading into their outdoor game, the Heritage Classic in Hamilton at the Donut Box, Tim Hortons Field?
Next week, man. Yeah, I mean, look, the rivalry is purely geographic. It's Philip, just as I wouldn't necessarily know the geography in Sweden, but it's, 150, 160 kilometers between Toronto and Buffalo. It allows always, when the teams play each other, for fans from both sides to quite easily go to the games. Obviously, across that 150 and 160 kilometers between the cities, you get a cross section of fans where there's Leaf fans out there, but obviously Sabres fans too. And the cool thing about Hamilton, it's basically right in the middle of the two cities. I mean, maybe not exactly equidistant, but it is between them. And I think it'll make for a cool atmosphere on March 13th next weekend when we get to see them play each other.
Well, you will. I'll likely be watching from my couch. That's lucky. I would still like to go to an outdoor game before it's all said and done, at the very least. I got one last question. This is from Red Shark Pack on Discord. By the way, if you haven't joined the Discord for SDPN, you can go on the sdpn.ca website and you can find the link to join the Discord. It's a lot of fun, a lot of great laughs, a lot of different sub channels for all the different shows on the SDPN network you can take part of as well, including our show. Could CJ reflect on life as a sports reporter now and 2 years ago, as the anniversary of this tweet is coming up? And it's a tweet from the PHWA. It's actually a statement off a tweet from the PHWA. We, the entities covering pro and college sports in North America, are concerned with the developing international outbreak of coronavirus and the need to contain it. We understand precautions may be necessary in the name of public health. We are intent on working with the leagues, teams, and schools we cover to maintain safe work environments. I'm not going to read all of it, but essentially it deals with locker room access. And I believe we are the 7th today, 2 days away from the anniversary of that tweet, and getting closer to the 2-year anniversary of when all of our worlds were flipped upside down. So essentially they want an idea of what's been like from being a reporter from that day on to now. That's a long thought question. We got time.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Like, I'm sure it's the way any of the listeners feel about their life. Like, everything's been turned upside down. There's no comparing the world I used to work in until March of 2020 to the one today in terms of work. I've been to like 100 games with no fans in that 2 years. Haven't been in a locker room at all during that time. And that was a normal part of our day-to-day working existence. And I feel a little more detached than I would have back then. I think it's totally normal. I'm sure the players feel detached in some way. Like, we're all still just getting used to it, I think, in a sense. I'm not saying any of this to criticize the league or the teams. And I do know some NHL teams have resumed locker room access or some form of it. At the All-Star weekend in Vegas last month, I got to actually talk face-to-face to players again for what for me was the first time since March 2020. It was weird seeing some old familiar faces. It was nice. I think we're all working our way back there, but it's different and it's changed forever too. I mean, I think everyone's job has, And I've actually changed jobs too. To add onto that is I've actually switched companies and everything. So I'm doing the same type of things, but I'm not doing the exact same role I had either. So it's hard to reflect on it. Honestly, it's hard to come up with like a nice, succinct answer. But if I'm being completely honest, I've enjoyed the job less during this time. But I think, again, it's just a reflection of it's been a difficult period in everyone's life. And I've been fortunate really not to be touched by it to a great degree, knock wood. But it's been a challenging time. And I do hope we get back to a day where we can have easier relationships and we can talk to players. Because I think that I do think there's value to it. I understand not all fans care about quotes. I understand the fans don't like it when reporters complain about access and all that stuff. But I mean, really the way I see sports is it's sort of like reality TV essentially. And there's a lot of redeeming aspects to sports. And I've always thought it's my job to try to explain what's happening, to maybe give the perspective of what the athlete is going through when it's, say, a period of struggle, or even when you're covering a run to the Stanley Cup final and it's this great period of joy in someone's life. I mean, the players usually in that situation are so filled with gratitude for people who helped get them there. And we can tell those stories. I think we can sort of give a better understanding of what's going on. It's not just a hockey game, I guess is my point. There's a lot of other aspects to it. And so I hope we get back to a world where we can do that. I have no idea if we will or not. I don't know if like the toothpaste is out of the tube now forever and we'll just never be back in the dressing room or what have you. But it's been challenging. And honestly, everything for the person who asked the question, like everything is different. In March of 2020, I went on a road trip with the Maple Leafs to California the first week of that March. Like I was probably, in those days I was on the road 150 days a year. I'm barely traveling now, which is actually fine. Like that's turned out to be a positive development for me personally, because I've gotten my health in order a little better. And I just feel like it's a better way for me to live. But like the job I was doing then it bears no resemblance to the one I'm doing today.
I'll do actually one last question off of Discord. This is Colin from Discord. CJ, do you have any stories of trades that almost happened but fell apart just before the deadline? Any stars that were on the move but didn't? I mean, obviously there are different trades you can go back to that almost didn't happen. But I guess maybe they're looking for any particular story that maybe you kind of just burns in your mind a little bit brighter than some of the others.
There's one in my mind, but I'm not going to say it because it's
okay.
going to melt the internet. And I promise I will tell it at some point on the show. But the players are too prominent, and I just don't need the hassle. If I'm being honest, like I have one, I've got a great one, and I will share it when the time is right. But the time is not right today.
That is a very good tease for a future edition of Ask CJ. And that concludes the segment and the show, this Monday edition of the Chris Johnston Show. I'm very excited about that trade. And whenever we get to listen to it, man, I will be, man, you got to stop everything we're doing. Let me know when you're ready to share that story.
I'm not even going to press that button. I'm not even going to tell you off because I want you to share in the surprise when I do tell the story for real. So
you know what? That's fair. But when you're ready to press the big red button, let me know. I'll be there. Sure. I'll stop what I'm doing. I don't care. We'll find a way to make that work, whether it's on the podcast, whether it's over drinks, whether it's over anything. I'll be there. We'll make it work.
I'll share it with you. They make the show. So I will tell them. It's just, honestly, it's just a little too soon right now.
That's very fair. But look at you, the principal. You've got to give the people what they want, and you'll do that in due time. CJ, a pleasure doing these shows with you as always. We'll be back on Thursday with a brand new episode of Our Fair Show. It is a Monday, so we're going to have the Steve Dangle podcast come out with an episode as well. Also, be sure to check out Agent Provocateur, Noxie and Cax as well, and all the other fun stuff that the SDPN can provide. That's pretty much all the housekeeping, unless you wanted to add something before we wrap this baby up, my man.
No, I'm all good, my man.
Let's do it then. For CJ, I'm Julian saying so long and peace. We'll be back on Thursday with a new show.
Let's go out.
Let's go out. I don't think he says that. That's okay.
The Chris Johnston Show. Inside the game, twice a week. Follow Chris on Twitter @ReporterChris. And follow Julian McKenzie @JK McKenzie.